Welcome to the Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Krieger. Todd has over 35 years of experience working with thousands of couples as a licensed therapist in his private practice. Todd shares his insights on this show. It's never too early to divorce-proof your marriage or too late to heal yourselves and have the relationship you truly want.
Hi, everybody. This is Todd Krieger, and today I am talking to you about EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, to help treat couples healing from infidelity. I have a lot to say about it. It's something I've worked on for many years, but this is actually a special podcast because you can see, first of all, that I have a guest with me, Mary Eason, who's going to be talking in a little bit, but more towards the end, and I'll explain why. What we're doing here is I'm doing my typical podcast, giving you some good information that I hope you could really utilize and share with people. But also I'm part of a podcast-thon. This is something that's been done since 2023, and I was intrigued by this idea. What the podcast-thon started out in 2023 was with over 300 French-speaking podcasts. That was pretty good for a start, 300. In March 2024, there were about over 400 podcasts from France, Belgium, Switzerland, Quebec, and also French-speaking Africa. They brought together over 1,500 podcasters. And in 2025, it's even bigger than that. And it's all over the world. It's multilingual. And the purpose of that is to focus on one charity. And just to bring awareness, we're not asking for donations. You're not going to be asked to donate anything, even though we'll give you the opportunity to donate if you ever want to. But this is more about bringing awareness. And since I'm talking about EMDR, my charity that I have chosen for this is EMDR HAP. And we'll explain that and what that means. Of course, that's why Mary's here, because she has been very involved in it. And I'm excited about this. This is an organization that does many things, one of which it brings the treatment of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing to communities that need it, often disasters, most recently some of the LA fires, but many other disasters, both local and worldwide. So this is a special podcast here. Okay. But now I'm going to start by talking about what I do when I speak, when I treat, how I think about infidelity. So now that's what I'm known for mostly, healing infidelity, individuals as well as couples. And some people have described me on YouTube as a betrayer apologist, which I am not. I don't apologize. I don't make excuses for people that betray. I do not. As a matter of fact, the pain of infidelity is enormous. And the person who was betrayed is going through tremendous pain. And I call betrayal, infidelity, an interpersonal crime. So I'm not light on it. And what I mean by it's an interpersonal crime is that it steals from the person who didn't know what was going on the opportunity to make decisions based on what's true. For example, if we're driving and we come to an intersection, we need information to make a good decision. Is it safe to go, or do we need to stay put? Can I go left? Can I go right? We need good information so that we can make a decision. So a person who betrays, who has an affair of some kind, whether it's physical, virtual, etc., you're depriving that partner of yours the opportunity to make decisions based on what's true. And that, to me, is a stealing. It's a stealing. That's why I call it an interpersonal crime. So I'm attuned to the pain of the person who's betrayed. At the same time, to cast most people that betray as some bad person, to villainize them, is missing the mark. That is not what's really going on. And I'm very interested in what's really true. Not what we think is true, not stories about what's true, but what is true. And my work with trauma, especially using EMDR and working with many of my colleagues, such as Mary on this podcast, is that we are made up of different aspects of ourselves. We call it different things. Sometimes, for simplicity, I like to call it parts. We're made up of different parts. We're not just one. So a person who betrays, not all of them wanted to have this affair. Maybe a part of them, maybe several parts of them. In almost all cases, there's parts of them that knew the whole time it was incorrect, that have guilt, that have remorse. I'm not necessarily talking about people that are sociopathic here. The great majority of my clients are not. But there's a part of them that did that. And it's my job to try to understand and help the client and help the partner understand what that part was trying to do for it. It's like we're a system, and everything we do is for a reason. And so I'm very interested in doing an archaeological dig with that person who betrayed, to try to help them understand what made them do it. How else will they ever be trustworthy again? A person who betrayed, who goes, I won't ever do it again, doesn't mean anything if they haven't addressed the underlying core patterns of why. So what I'm going to talk to you about is EMDR, but I'm going to also include another approach that I use, IFS, which stands for Internal Family Systems. And I use it for a variety of reasons. It's a simplistic language. It fits with my clients and what they do. But I am definitely an EMDR therapist that utilizes the IFS, Internal Family Systems, to help people process trauma. Before I have Mary talk about what is EMDR, because I think she could define it really wonderfully, I want to just say that there are different factors of what makes people cheat. And one of which is that we all, most all of us, are not one. We have different parts of us. I've been married 40 plus years, but I'd be lying if there wasn't a part of me that would go, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to have an experience with somebody new? It's a part of me, but it's certainly not going to hijack me. It's not something that I would want to do, and I haven't done in my 40 plus year relationship. But sometimes a part of that person will hijack you. And why is that? I believe that everything we do is to regulate our emotions. Attachment theory, which is a theory I utilize, talks about there are two ways we regulate our energy. One is we regulate it down, and one is we regulate it up. Regulating down means we go from more stressed to less stressed. And regulating up means we go from empty or neutral or bored to more alive. And we do that. I do that with my grandchild. When I stimulate him, he's sitting there and we start to play with the little black and white or colorful things, or I smile at him, or I sing him a song and he brightens up. He's being upregulated by my attunement to him. When he's stressed and crying, we got to figure out what it is. We tune into him. Sometimes I get it right. If I don't, I try something else. But we try to tune into him. We're down-regulating him. This is what happens from the beginning of our life on this planet, and it continues throughout our lifespan. We're continually trying to regulate ourselves up and regulate ourselves down. I have found that people that betray are oftentimes people, it could go either way. It could be to escape stress, down-regulating, or it could be to feel more alive. I could get more deeply into it. Maybe I will for a second. What are the things that I've found? Especially I have found this with men, is that a man that has a mother, who had a mother who, for example, was preoccupied, was not able to give them to attunement. Let me just define attunement. Attunement is, because I used that word already, is when I give you the experience that I get you, that I'm understanding you, that I'm with you. So if a child is excited and I go, oh my God, you're so excited. And I talk like this and I get all excited with them, they get the sense that I'm with them. If every time If a mother is preoccupied, if they're overly stressed, and every time their child gets excited, they say, could you just settle down? You're making too much noise. Or if they're sad and fearful and the message they get is just deal with it. Okay. Oftentimes they can call that an avoidance attachment, but more what I'm focusing on is they're oftentimes left with an under-attunement, an under-stimulation, and it leaves the person feeling empty. I have found that many of the people that either do compulsive masturbation or act out sexually in other ways are oftentimes people that came with that kind of childhood. They felt empty and they're trying to do something to fill themselves up. So there's a young part of them that is looking for a way to feel more alive. Now, as in everything when it comes to humans, it's complex. I'm not trying to keep it so simple. There are people that oftentimes it becomes a stress relief for them, whether it's compulsive masturbation or even infidelity on some level. My point here is that we always want to try to understand what's going on. On the side of the betrayed person, they also have different parts of them. So there's a part of them that has been hurt, that has been traumatized. I use EMDR a lot for people that was betrayed just to process the trauma so they can move on. But it also can trigger earlier trauma, childhood trauma or it could be teenage trauma. It could be any age trauma where they were betrayed in some other way, let down, abandoned. And it doesn't just trigger them in terms of the here and now, but it also can trigger old hurts and old wounds. So why I use EMDR is it's a way to help people beyond just talk therapy, to help them begin to process whatever the trauma was. Just to use my examples that I've used, if the person who betrayed had a life where they were understimulated, it's my job to help them attune into the little boy that didn't get enough and help them make up for that deficiency one way or the other, help them have resources, help that little boy know what it's like to resolve it. In the case of the betrayed person that might have been betrayed or abandoned earlier in life, we might start here and now, but we backtrack and go to a point where maybe the worst or the first terrible memory of abandonment and betrayal, we help them process it. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to ask you, Mary, now to talk a little bit about EMDR, which I know you're going to mainly talk later about this charity that we'll be talking about, but can you give the audience your own way of defining what eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is and why you use it?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Do you remember the last time you and your partner got into that same argument for what felt like the 1,000th time? You know that moment when you see the familiar signs, the tone shift, the defensive posture, the rising tension, and you think, here we go again. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Licensed therapist Todd Krieger has worked with over 1,000 couples who felt trapped in these exact same destructive patterns. And after 30 years of clinical experience, he's discovered something fascinating. Relationship conflict isn't about poor communication skills or incompatibility. It's about understanding what's happening in your brain during those heated moments and having practical tools to redirect that energy toward connection instead of combat. That's why Todd created From Bickering to Connecting, a 90-minute masterclass that teaches neuroscience-backed techniques like the STOP method and 90-second rule. Take Jennifer and Mark, who had been fighting about household responsibilities for years. After learning Todd's techniques, they can now discuss the exact same topic without it exploding. As Jennifer put it, it's like we finally have a pause button for our arguments. Instead of another week of tension, you could be applying these life-changing techniques tonight. For just $97 for both you and your partner, you get lifetime access to the same tools that have helped over 1,000 couples break free from destructive patterns. You can find the link to enroll in Todd's Loving and Connecting Masterclass in the show notes.
Todd, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about.
And by the way, Mary is a psychologist. I didn't even introduce you yet. Mary's a psychologist. She's a certified EMDR therapist. She does consulting. She's an approved consultant, I believe, and among other things. So go ahead.
Oh, it's EMDR language. EMDR initially was started by Dr. Francine Shapiro in her PhD program, and she was going through some stressful events in her life. And she noticed as she was walking in a park that her eyes, while she was walking, her eyes moved from side to side. And she realized that she felt better and she didn't understand what was happening, but she thought that the eye movement had something to do with it. So she began to research this in the late 80s and then wrote her dissertation on this, working with Vietnam vets, and realized that there was something to the eye movement in helping decrease the impact of traumatic events. And since that time, it's evolved to the reprocessing aspect, which is the idea that these memories, these traumatic memories we have, get stored dysfunctionally, and they create these memory networks. And so if we have trauma in our childhood or even in our adulthood, and it can feel overwhelming to us, that can be like a big T trauma, like a car accident, or it can be small T trauma, which is repeated trauma over time, disattunement, like Todd's talking about. Not having attuned parenting can cause a lot of small T traumas. And sometimes these become too difficult for the brain to process out effectively. And so EMDR is this kind of trauma model with the idea that our traumatic memories are stored dysfunctionally in the same images, thoughts, emotions, and sensations that they had whenever we experienced our trauma. And EMDR believes that the brain can heal itself, that the brain is capable, it's adaptive, it's able to take memories and just make sense of them. That's why we don't remember what we had for breakfast 2 weeks ago, because the brain doesn't think, it's whatever, and off it goes. But when the trauma is too significant and the brain gets overloaded, those memories get stored dysfunctionally. So EMDR therapy, in its evolution from when Dr. Francine Shapiro originally discovered this, has found that reprocessing of the memories. So with the eye movement or other bilateral movement can allow for the brain, helps the brain connect to that adaptive part, understand the memory, desensitize the memory, and discharge it. And so that's it in a really condensed.
That's great. Well said. You said it better than I ever could. That's what we do. So that's what we do. And it's a wonderfully exciting intervention. A quick funny story about it is in early 90s, I was told about this thing called EMDR, and I was going to do it, but I was told by someone, oh, it's too boring for you. You shouldn't do it. And I actually didn't listen. I listened to that person, not to my own gut, and I didn't do it. Years later, I was finding that when I was working with low sexual desire, which is another specialty of mine, I wasn't helping people who were molested as children. I just wasn't getting the help. So I tried different things. I tried the tapping therapies and all that. So I finally went for EMDR. It was years later. It was 2015. Oh my God, the best thing I ever did. I've had such success working with couples in that specific thing. That was what I did it for people that were molested and that it affected their sexuality. It blocked them from healthy sexuality. And I found that in pretty quick order, sometimes I was able to help people where I didn't before. And then I've used it for many other things. So thank you for that. And so in terms of dealing with infidelity, again, there's a lot that's going on there. And when I work with an individual, I might do EMDR differently than when I'm working with a couple. When I'm working with a couple, I have two people. I do work with healing from infidelity with individuals. And when I do it with just the infidelity, we go right into the process. And if there's trauma involved, which there almost always is, some kind of developmental things going on, then we go right into that EMDR and I go into it fully. With a couple, I might not go into it fully with one person. I might even switch off, do a few sessions at most with one and a few sessions with the other. Because what I find is when they are at least able to regulate, as Mary was saying, start to connect to their adaptive information processing, connecting with their healthy self. Right? Another thing they call EMDR is a dual awareness process where you're in your trauma when you're doing the EMDR, but we're very well aware, and they're very well aware. There's this healthy adult person, if you're working with an adult, in your presence. EMDR is wonderful with children and teenagers too. But to realize there's always that person in the moment present, as well as we're dealing with that part of them or that traumatic memory from the past. in any event, I do use that, and it's really helpful, and it helps people get into their adult parts. As you can see, I talk about parts. The part that, and the betrayed person that cheats is not their healthy adult part. It's another part. And so why I use this other system as well in terms of languaging, internal family systems, is because I find that the way they define parts makes a lot of sense when I'm dealing with infidelity. One part that they talk about is the wounded part. So when I talk about in this case, let's say the male who committed infidelity, believe me, I have plenty of women that commit infidelity as well. Let's say the male with infidelity, we find that they grew up in a household where they were not tuned into very much at all by mom, left alone, under-attuned, okay? And we're trying to help that person process it. We try to help them get to eventually to that little boy part. And that's what they call in IFS terminology, the exiled part. What they mean by exiled is that we don't go around flashing our wounds to everybody. Now, for example, the first person I ever did EMDR with, Mary, this is an interesting thing. I took the first weekend of the training back in 2015 or 2014. It might have been 2014. I think I was certified in 2015, whatever it was. And he had a lot of, as Mary said, little T's, a little complex trauma. Lived in a household where parents were not present. They had to work a lot. He was beat up almost nightly by an older brother. He was molested and shamed when he tried to tell his parents, his mother and stepfather, about it. So he had a lot of complex trauma. And I ended up getting out of this weekend, and he was my first client I was going to do EMDR with. And I totally traumatized him. I went way too fast, right into the wound where he wasn't ready for it. He didn't have the resources. He didn't have enough preparation, and I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I thought I did, but I didn't. And a couple of years later, he came back to me, and I had an opportunity to have a second chance with him, and he's doing beautifully. He's doing wonderfully. When it comes to internal family systems words, they talk about protective parts. So yes, we have a wounded part. We have these protective parts. Us, the EMDR therapists, talk about parts that are defensive. There's a lot of different words for it that can be really helpful as well. But talking with the IFS terminology, there's two kinds of protective parts. One is the manager. This guy had a very strong manager part. He ended up becoming a very successful CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, and he did well. And when I went in there not knowing what I was doing and went too fast to his wound, it hijacked him. He wasn't ready for it. And he called me up a few days later. He says, I can't even function at work. We helped him. I helped him heal that and get back in place. Why is that? Because he had a protective part, several, that weren't ready to deal with it. That manager part, he wasn't ready to deal with the exile part. So when I work with someone with EMDR, I pay attention to now, of course, their defenses, what's in the way. So IFS uses these terms like the manager part. So the manager keeps the wounded part out of consciousness. Yes, I'm going to be successful. No one's going to ever have to know about this part of me that feels ashamed, that feels powerless, and neither will I have to even ever really get in touch with it. The problem with that is it doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. And people will oftentimes have these symptoms because of this unprocessed trauma. So this manager part. And I see that all the time. There's another kind of protective part they call the firefighter. The firefighter part, when this wounded part may start to get triggered, maybe something's going on in a person's life, maybe they had a bad week or day or month where they feel inadequate and this part starts to come out, the firefighter distracts them and they can act out in some way to avoid feeling their wound. And so with a person who betrayed, infidelity might be that firefighter protective part that's distracting them. Sure enough, oftentimes when we slow it down, take another look and see what might have been going on in the days, weeks, months, maybe years before the person acted out, you start to get in touch with this wound. There were triggers that were starting to make that wound come up. Feeling inadequate, feeling worthless, feeling powerless, feeling scared, feeling unsafe. I have a couple I've been working with where he cheated basically his entire marriage to his wife, and she discovered it. And of course, it was very painful. And as we got into his story, he had a father who terrorized him and his mother, literally terrorized them with threats of violence, with screaming and yelling and throwing things. His childhood was a nightmare. And so what he did was he always tried to be perfect to avoid harm. He told me he would take 2 hours to write an email to make sure it was perfect. He got obsessed with money and looking good, and he ended up constantly sexualizing women. And for him, it was both an upregulator and a downregulator. When he was caught, he was also drinking a lot too. Okay, so he would use alcohol and sex to ward off tremendous feelings of feeling unsafe. His wounded self felt so unsafe. And so as I worked with him with the EMDR, what we did, the bilateral stimulation that Mary talked about, and we helped him process in a way that made sense, worked with his protective parts. But when we got to that little boy that was so terrified, that there were several intense sessions of EMDR, he came out of it saying, I'll never forget this session I had with him, because he was so scared and so hurt, and then he was so angry, and you see the whole process. And I got to know more and more, and his memory got clearer on some of how he was tormented, as well as he watched his mother get tormented. And then at some time in there, and it wasn't too many sessions in, he said, my dad was a great dad until I was 8 and he lost his job. Boy, can you imagine the trauma he was in, the childhood he must have had? Huh. And I go, what? How? He goes, I just feel such compassion for my father. This was not a defense. This was a legitimate, like, he came to that understanding. He had that adaptable information processing where he was able to take on his healthy self with the resources that we talked about, and was able to see things more clearly. And so what was a childhood nightmare, he was able to reprocess that memory and be an adult partner that can be safe, that can be trustworthy. Now, that doesn't mean, let's talk about the person who was betrayed, that suddenly she was like totally great. This is wonderful after years of being cheated on. And we're not done. We're still working with this couple. But I did a lot of EMDR with her, the EMDR of when she first found out, then going back to when he would be mean to her earlier in the marriage. And usually he was mean when he felt like she was getting in the way of his financial well-being, because she ended up going back to school and becoming a doctor. She went to med school, but she wasn't making money. And he was mean because it was getting in the way with this little boy part that needed to be successful. So he felt unsafe, not good, to be abusive to his wife. He didn't hit her, but he yelled and he was mean, and then he cheated. None of that's good. But with her, we were able to help her heal a lot. We're not done yet, but heal some of the memories that she had, both when she was at the effect of his abuse, but also when the moments she discovered the infidelity, and there was a continual discovering of the infidelity. They're in a much better place. Again, we're not finished yet, but they're in a much better place. I'll say this, it's a bold statement. I think he's as trustworthy a person as anybody I've met now, despite the fact that he cheated so much in his lifetime, because he got to the trauma. The little boy had a chance to feel safe as we processed. And that little boy is not going to hijack him. Chances are very good that will never happen again. I can never guarantee it. But let's say when we're dealing with relationships, the probability is very good that he's a trustworthy person. And so that's just one more recent example of how I've used EMDR and how he understood this whole part of him that was like a firefighter part that IFS talks about, that he was able to successfully, with great harm to himself and her, distract himself from the absolute agony of feeling so unsafe and so worthless, I would say. And then S has its own terminology for the healthy part. They have a self with a capital S. In EMDR parlance, and I think, Mary, you would probably agree that we talk about the capacity to have an adaptive information processing, that there are aspects of us that are quite healthy that can serve as resources. And also we could take in resources. Other people can be resources. Different parts of us can be resources. Oftentimes with EMDR, we'll do what's called cognitive interweaves, where we help people look at what would you say if that was your child going through that, and it evokes that healthy adult parent part that might be very kind to their child if they were in that condition, but surely haven't been that kind to themselves. There are many things we do with the bilateral processing, as well as installing what we call a positive cognition. Like this man, suddenly this positive cognition was, I'm safe in the world. I'm enough versus I'm not safe. I'm not enough. As we install that part of the EMDR 8-step process, he walks around more solid, more healthy in his adult place. Does that mean he never has an insecure feeling? Of course not. But he has the resources to regulate. And really what we're talking about is just that. How do we help people regulate so that they don't dysregulate themselves or dysregulate their partner or dysregulate their relationship? So now a couple, as they go through this kind of healing using EMDR, that they can live more and more in their adult self, and they can have more adult to adult conversations where they handle their pain, but they can regulate each other's autonomic nervous system in healthy ways, as opposed to the secrets and the infidelity and all the stuff that people do. And of course, even with the betrayed person, a part of the betrayed person oftentimes wants to get revenge. Who wouldn't? There's a part of them that's angry, that wants to get revenge, might even want to have their own affair. And I've had clients that have done that have been betrayed, and it makes their life worse every time. So it's appreciating all the parts, making room for them, understanding, being kind to them, but at the same time, helping them regulate in such a way that they have the best chance of being healthy individuals and healthy partners. So the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Mary is that infidelity is terrible. It's a terrible thing. It's a crisis. But there can be two things true at the same time. It's a crisis, but there is also something called post-traumatic growth. And I've seen thousands of couples that have gone through this crisis of infidelity, even though it's a bad thing, that they develop the kind of relationships that they never had even before the infidelity started or before the discovery of it, because they have now had the opportunity to explore the different parts of who they are and have better options in how to regulate themselves and each other. So that's a little bit more of how I use EMDR with a little help of IFS to help couples heal from infidelity. But I do want to talk to you now about this charity, because I was thinking, what do I want to do? And it took me all of about 2 minutes to say, oh, I know what I want. So Mary, I want you to talk about this wonderful organization and what they do, and maybe how people can learn about it, and if they want, donate.
Your charity is EMDR Humanitarian Assistance Programs, which is now EMDR Trauma Recovery / Humanitarian Assistance Program. And
yes, I know the fast.
I just wanted to I don't want to clarify, but the website is still emdrhappy.org if you want to go check it out. But we're
EMDR.org. I'm just repeating it. Yes.
Yeah. But we're trauma recovery. And I think it speaks to the overall goal of the organization. And again, this organization started by Dr. Francine Shapiro not long after she developed EMDR therapy herself. So in 1995, think back when the Oklahoma City bombing occurred. One of the FBI agents had EMDR therapy, which is really astounding because it hadn't been around that long. From the time she discovered it, worked on her dissertation, started treating it, I don't know really how he found out about it, but he called for help. Because if you guys remember in Oklahoma City, that was a huge bombing with 68 people died. I think 168 people died, plus hundreds wounded. And then if we think about how trauma gravitates out, it's all those people's families and all those people who didn't go to work that day, or all those people who live in the neighborhood, how impacted that is. So trauma has a way of affecting everybody, even if you're not in the moment. And then if we think about all the first responders who were there, so everybody from dispatch to ambulance to all the FBI agents, all the firefighters, trauma can be just so overwhelming. So this wonderful FBI agent asked for help, saying that, imagine in Oklahoma City in 1995, there's not enough therapists in Oklahoma City to handle the need of everybody who was impacted. So at that time, 100 EMDR trained therapists went into Oklahoma City. They did training of therapists there. They saw 1,000 people they went in, they took like shift work, like 2 weeks that one men would come and they would just rotate in, and ended up seeing 1,000 people. And out of that development became this trauma recovery, humanitarian assistance, with the idea of helping communities in the event of disaster, but also teaching people about the impact of trauma. And so it has evolved over this time to where they do a lot of different things. They do trainings around the world. They help underserved communities who may not have enough clinicians, or to communities, who have huge events. And we can talk a little about the LA fire, which is one of our current responses, who don't have enough clinicians trained in EMDR, or just don't have enough clinicians. And there was a hurricane in Florida last year where they did a call out to every EMDR clinician in the trauma recovery network, and I can talk a little bit more about that, to come and help do what Francine developed called the recent traumatic episode. No, oh my goodness, that's so bad.
What's that? Recent traumatic?
Is it the recent traumatic episode? It's not. So I get confused because in the Orange County CRN, we do the recent traumatic episode protocol, and she does the recent protocol. So she developed this for interventions. If something that's happened to you happened recently, and the research of this shows that if we can get in there and do EMDR therapy, this recent event protocol, we can keep people who have experienced traumatic episodes from converting to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really profound and really can impact life. And I can talk a little bit about, we're responding right now in Orange County to the Fullerton plane crash, which was January 3rd. And they went back to work. A lot of employees went back to work because they came through our trauma recovery network here in Orange County, and we worked with them. And there was also some on the ground work done from the County of Orange that was really helpful, and from the fire departments. So basically, the EMDR trauma recovery has, besides education and training, and then providing support in underserved communities, we also have a regional kind of organizations can pop up. You can do one on your own if you're an EMDR therapist and you're listening, and there isn't a trauma recovery network in your area. You can volunteer to start one, which is what happened here in Orange County. Do you want me to talk a little bit about how we started?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Todd and I are both practicing here in Orange County, and you might remember the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting, which happened in Las Vegas. I think it was in 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. And for those of you who are listening, who are familiar with Southern California, we're a short drive to Las Vegas. And so a lot of people who were at that festival were from Southern California. So what's happening is hundreds of people who were there came back home and were traumatized. Some of them had been shot and they were in recovery, but they were traumatized. And so my colleague, Dr. Michelle Gottlieb, we have been talking about starting our own TRN. And after that happened, we realized, oh my gosh, we don't have the resources really. We're not organized to respond. We decided in 2018 that we would develop our own trauma recovery network. And so if you go on the website and you click on the tab that says TRN, you can see all the trauma recovery networks in the United States. And so if you're hearing me, but you're not in Southern California, you can go look and see if there's one in your area. And our goal is to respond to events that happen to the citizens of our county and provide pro bono EMDR sessions to help people move through that and get back to work, back to functioning.
That's great. That's great. And you're so right that if you get to it soon enough,
Yes,
that it can prevent PTSD. That's amazing. People don't realize that PTSD isn't just from trauma, it's from unprocessed trauma. And so to get in there and help them process that trauma with the skill and the recent event protocols, that could really save a lot of problems, a lot of therapy later to be able to do that.
People, you think that, well, that must take a really long time. And what we have found and what the research finds and what the national organization, Trauma Recovery, has found, that in as little as 3 sessions, somebody can feel back to normal, so to speak. We don't take the memory away, but we take the body's response to the memory. We allow the adaptive part of the brain to understand what happened. So when we responded to Cook's Corner shooting, August 2023, we probably saw 50 people over 6 months. And what always surprises even the clinicians, like in 3 sessions, they're feeling really good and they can go back to work there, or they could go back to their jobs. And I'm often surprised by that as well, that 3 or 4 sessions and people feel reconstituted and they're able to sleep better, their functioning is better. And so that always surprises me. And so if you're listening to Todd and I today and you've had an experience like this, you're going to want to seek some EMDR work, because I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, it's the Cook's Corner thing. We had just landed in Hawaii, my family, and my client called me up and said, my best friend's wife was killed. I'm pretty sure I got that. Anyway, I talked about you guys and I said, I'm here. I'm about to start a vacation anyway. But he got back to me later. And sure enough, like you said, the person was doing okay. I'm
sure I probably talked to them, because everybody I bet coordinate that. I'm the coordinator for the Orange County Trauma Recovery Network. And so really proud of the work we do. And we're all volunteers and we're already trained, and most people in the TRN obviously work in mental health. But one of the biggest things that HAP does, which I think the funding is so important for, is the reaching out and talking about trauma and educating people to trauma, so they don't think it's their fault if their brain goes off.
Yes.
You need to think it's me, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, but it isn't. It's the trauma impacting the way you respond to the event, because some events are so incredibly overwhelming, your brain can manage it, and it's okay to ask for help. And so if you were to donate, the money would go to help train therapists in underserved communities, train therapists who may not have access or resources, but who want to do trauma work. They provide low-cost training. This is how I got trained initially. They also work with nonprofits, and HAP is a nonprofit organization. They do worldwide responses. So they were initially sending people from the United States out into the world, right? Africa, and where all the events were happening. But people have been trained in EMDR all over the world. And so there are trauma recovery networks worldwide with volunteers doing it. It's a great cause to just trying to heal the trauma, trying to get people to understand that they don't have to suffer with the sleepless nights, the hypervigilant responses, the things that kind of jolt you awake and go, we can work and you can feel better. So
those that end up shutting down and freezing and going the other way too.
Absolutely, yes.
All for that.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds great. I love it, Mary. Give them the website again.
It's www.emdrhap as in Paul.org. So go over, you can read all about it and look at all the things they're doing. And I'm really proud to be a part of this organization.
That's great. All right. I'm going to stop the recording in a second, and I want to talk with you before, so don't go away. But thank you all for listening.
Can I make a plea?
Yes, please.
If you're an EMDR trained therapist and you're licensed in the state of California, please reach out to the orangecountytrn.com because we're in need of EMDR therapists for our LA fire response. We did not have an LA County TRN, and we just got up and running just in the last 4 weeks. And if you're a California licensed therapist, please let us know. We would love to have you help our response. So please.
Great. Or if you know someone that is, let us know about this. Yes. That's great. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. As I always sign off, this is Todd Krieger, making the world safe.
That's it for today's episode of Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Krieger. For free resources and materials, head over to toddkrieger.com. Loved this episode? Head over to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you.